nice welcome to the outside world here from the Siemens SCM DigiSofa. My name is Thomas Holzner. I have today two nice, beautiful guests. Henrike Diers on my right-hand side from Siemens Mobility, CPO of a business unit. On the left-hand side, it's Robert Suchy, my colleague from Siemens Corporate SCM. He is responsible for pooling. I'm Thomas Holzner, taking care of the digital network and other digital transformation stuff. And before we go into details, I have to make a small excuse. My internet at home crashed 50 minutes ago, and now with the support of Daniel, I migrated to the iPad, and I hope it will be stable. So we are here used to be agile, so I don't prefer this kind of being agile, but at the end of the day, I hope you can see and hear me. And then I'm more than happy to answer all your questions. How I will do this, I don't know yet. So please a little bit take care of me when I need some minutes to set up the chat. In the meantime, Henrike and Robert can introduce themselves because today we talk about pooling within Siemens AG. So Henrike, the stage is yours.
I start? Okay. Well, thanks for having me. Good morning, I guess, to most of you out there. My name is Henrike Diers. I'm 41 years old, and I've been with Siemens for 15 years now, most of the time in procurement functions and supply chain functions. That might sound a little bit homogeneous, but it has been quite an exciting ride, actually, through 3 different industries and in various countries. And I now work for the mobility industry in the rail infrastructure arena as a CPO or Head of Procurement for a global organization that includes around 200 people around the world buying for projects and products in the rail infrastructure environment. And I'm really happy to be on the DigiSofa today.
So you're more or less sitting next to me, Henrike. Nice to see you, at least virtually. And of course, all of you out there on the screens, a warm welcome also from my side. I'm Robert Suchy. I'm heading the corporate commodities at Siemens. I'm a supply chain long timer, I have to say. For many years, I'm with the supply chain function in all various kinds of tasks. Right now, I'm heading corporate commodities, and those commodities we are pooling across business, from direct material all the way to indirect material. I would bet most of you are familiar with what is direct material, what is indirect material, but to make it a little bit more crisp, for you on the screens. So what we are pooling at Siemens starts somewhere in the direct material with electronics, electromechanics, mechanics. It goes all the way to indirect spend as travel, as fleet, as IT, consulting, or even logistics. So that's
we are pooling everything.
Sorry?
So we're pooling nearly everything, Robert.
Well, not really, but a rough estimate, a little bit less than half of our total Siemens purchasing volume is pooled volume indeed.
So we don't talk about figures, but I guess this will be roughly 15 billion euro. So you're a very important person, and I think Henrike is taking care also 1 or the other billion euro regarding PVO. So it's not that we get bored regarding the PVO coverage, and it's impressive. So I don't want to start with a question. I want to start with something like I experienced in the pooling for dummies, because pooling for dummies means one of the strategic levels of procurement is pooling. So it's easy. Sometimes it's easier said than done because complexity is also existing in this area. So, Robert, first question to you. Roughly, could you describe the outside world, roughly the setup of pooling and how it's done?
Yeah, my pleasure, actually, Thomas. In few words, actually, we distinguish between pooling on the indirect spend and pooling on the direct material side. On the indirect spend, we have fully centralized all procurement activities within on corporate level, on Siemens corporate level. A little bit different to what we do on the direct material side. On the direct material side, actually, we're building teams. So the commodity manager is heading a team consisting of the buyers in the business units.
So it's not only you, so the whole company is participating, or the whole community.
On the direct pool side, it is exactly like you say, but in both cases, indirect spend and direct pool material, of course, we're all doing that on behalf of the business units. It's not my spend, it's the spend of the businesses.
So it's our spend. Great.
Exactly.
So, Henrike.
Yes.
We know each other for a certain time, and I know you're a very extreme professional person regarding procurement. So could you shortly describe your shopping list at the business unit?
Shortly? No, that's not possible. It will take a while. No, yes, indeed. I think all three of us have known each other for a while. Back in PTD, or power transmission and distribution times, and transformer times. It's when I learned all the basics of procurement from the professionals that were already there. So what do we buy in rail infrastructure? One of my predecessors said that if you want to learn about procurement in Siemens, then you need to work in rail infrastructure, because we do everything. Yeah, we buy for projects and we buy for products. We buy lots of services, but also hardware. And we buy along the whole, let's say, life cycle of products that we have. We still manufacture and sell products, and therefore need material for these products that are several decades old, from the 1950s, for example. But we also sell products that are very, very high tech and very modern, and therefore the lifespan of what we buy also is quite extraordinary in terms of length. So from relay technology to the interlocking in the cloud, all of that needs to be manufactured or and then also installed with our customers. So installation services is quite a big one of the big four categories that we buy. Railcom is another one, and also cables and technical services. Lots of them, actually. So lots of manpower, lots of engineering services that we buy, and many of these things are also pooled in Robert's organization with the help of our category managers, of course.
So this means you have a huge bunch of different stuff, and you're not the typical suspect where you say we have a big factory and you produce something, because that's something that people sometimes relate to, like in automotive or transformers. A lot of similar. There's a very heterogeneous portfolio. So what are, from your point of view, the main advantages that you are joining the pooling community, and how do you benefit?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So we don't really benefit from the huge, and also the pooling community doesn't really benefit from us with high volumes that we would add to the portfolio. But we do benefit with regards to availability and also access to certain suppliers, where we alone, with niche demand that we would have, or very small demands on old, maybe close to obsolete materials, might not stand a chance of actually being able to get these covered. However, when Robert's organization with volume and size matters, right? Isn't that what we discussed? Opens doors, then that helps us in terms of especially availability of products, be it in crisis times or in everyday times.
So it's not only the pricing, it's also something like availability. And there's something when we prepared this sofa, I reflected with Robert, there are different benchmarks that have been done in the past. So every time Siemens has a merger, one of the first exercises that we compare the prices of the new company that we integrate and the prices we have. I'm not allowed to go into details, but I think the benchmark is roughly 98% in the cases we got a better price than our new brother, sister that we integrated. And I think especially as a small wind power background, there's one certain case when we had a benchmark where Robert could accommodate with a 50% lower price than the other company was providing. So this means pricing is something important, but size matters. I think that's not always correct, because when you look at the industry at the moment, especially the big automotives, have problems in getting enough material. So Robert, first of all, are you getting enough material for your colleagues? Similar like automotive. And the second topic is, if you are in a maybe better situation that we don't have factory stops, why do you think we are so successful regarding pooling? So first, situation in the factories, and secondly, why is this setup so far so successful?
Well, the teams, they made a tremendous good job over the course of the last 12 months, primarily very much impacted by the COVID-19, but not only COVID-19. So we managed to keep our factories running. And I have to say that starts before we talk about direct material, much before that. It started with simple things like masks you needed to get on the market, and there was a real run for masks. I can remember in the meantime, this is not so much on the agenda anymore. But in the early days, that was one of the biggest challenges, to be open and frank, and we mastered to do so. And by doing so, of course, we could ensure our factories keeping running. So that's the first one. And the second one, of course, now it's very much along with components, specifically electromechanical components, where the markets also give us a hard time, I have to say clearly.
So that's a little bit vague, a hard time. So are you still getting all the stuff you need, or what
well,
would you
here
say?
and there we're fighting, Thomas. Here and there we're fighting, and so far we had just one single line stop I could recall. But other than that, we managed by a let's say long-term set-up relationship with our most important suppliers to get what we need. Sometimes we needed to shift a little bit to left or right, but yes, we were jointly successful at the end.
Okay, I think the topic, the long-term partnership, we come back to this later, because we have in the meantime now two questions. One from Konrad, and here's the easy one, and I think that's for both of you. Dear colleagues, how do you balance the three different requirements: prices, availability, innovation? So, Henrike, as you have such a bunch of different stuff, how are you balancing these three things: prices, availability, innovations?
How do we? Well, I think it really always depends on the situation. Probably that's the answer that you were expecting. There is no just one answer to this. It can't always be in one corner of the triangle. You have to somehow manage to stay and balance in the middle. And there are times where availability is king, and the prices or costs are less important. Then there are projects where innovation is key, and the timing gives you more flexibility, and then there is sometimes there is a cost pressure that is the most important. So it really depends on not only the material field but also the project and the situation that you're in. And I think quality was also one of the aspects that I at least always had as part of that triangle, and innovation came to it too. So yeah, there are many aspects, and there's no one single truth or one answer.
So the balancing is always a juggling around with different things. So Robert, your comment regarding this?
Well, I couldn't add much to what just Henrike said, rightly said in my eyes. I guess it is very much depending on the situation, the supply markets as well. And right now, I was already mentioning COVID-19 as one example. We had other crisis topics like the volcano eruption or the Fukushima event. So in times like that, it is primarily about securing supply. But of course, we're balancing all 5 factors, and I would like to add one more. We had the productivity, we had the quality you mentioned, we had, of course, availability. That's one of the key things these days. Just think of Suez, just a couple of days ago, gives us a hard time. But then we also have innovation, which is very important, especially for Siemens, as innovation is part of our Siemens DNA. And the 5th one certainly is sustainability.
Okay. So I hope, Konrad, that this roughly answers your question. I think we have here 2 guys who are very eloquent and phrase it in a very diplomatic way. I have a question from Levent and from Charlotte Barnes, and I think they somehow link a little bit together. I will start with Charlotte, and I think it goes. We start with Robert now. Hi there. Have there been any particularly positive or negative impacts of COVID-19 on the environmental sustainability of Siemens' global value supply chain? So the positive, negative of COVID on sustainability of our global supply chain.
Before I answer that question, Thomas, I would like to get back to your statement. Yes. We're not polite, Henrike and I. We just very times like the ones we are in, and I guess everybody would agree it's crisis times. We would actually like to secure supply. That's the priority we have these days. And it is not just because of COVID-19, it's also because basically demand is higher than offering, and we need to deal with that. So that just to close that topic from before, but now to the question that has just been raised by, who was that?
I think it was Levent.
By lady. Anyhow,
no, and I think
it is
a lot. Barnes.
It was Lehman. You wanted to
Robert?
I think Robert's connection.
Robert is frozen.
No, I don't hear you anymore.
Charlotte, I think we have to wait a few minutes. Then there was the next question from Uli Reutzel, also about pooling. I think that's Robert. And but Henrike, then you can step in.
From Evan, your internet stays now, and that it's not just me left in the end on the sofa.
No, we will do it together. So,
okay.
What are your visions regarding procurement function in the next months or years to come?
My visions?
Yeah, about procurement function in the next years to come. Your personal.
That's didn't a chancellor once say if you have visions, you need to go and see a doctor or something? No, that's a joke. Put that aside. My vision for the procurement function in the years to come. Well, I think that has been a factor for quite a while. That data will do lots of our job already, and that the data that we collect at the moment gives us advantages in negotiations, in predicting what will happen. It also helps us to manage the crisis, for example, if we use the data that we have in the right way. I don't think we're there yet. I think there's still lots of work to be done with the data that we have, but that will shape our function. Using available data, predicting developments, and making use of that knowledge in the end. And this will very much shape our function. Also, the fact that, Robert already mentioned sustainability and the fact that we need to be a little bit wiser in terms of shaping our supply chains and our global footprint. Also, that will shape how we manage our supply chains and therefore also our suppliers to a great extent. And then the fact that we have seen these crises come along, I think there will be more crisis modes, and we will see lots of change happening. Need to build up our resilience to work through that change. Those would be the three things that I would find most challenging: data-driven decision making, then resilience for change, and the sustainability topic.
I think that's a nice summary, and it's already partly answering the next question from Nahadika. Sorry, sounds a little bit Indian maybe. What do you think about everything is going to be digital? Is it only because of COVID, or should it become permanent? So I step in. I personally think it's not only because of COVID. COVID was maybe a kind of accelerator, a catalysator. And when I look at the setup that we are, say, performing at Siemens, the last time I was in my real office, it was in February 20. And some of my colleagues have a similar approach. This means we are all working digital. There are good things and bad things. For example, we are doing supplier workshops with colleagues and partners in China, where the CEO mentioned we did it in a virtual 3D environment. So small spoiler, we will have a podcast released tomorrow or next week about this event, where the CEO said, okay, normally I should fly for a 2 hours workshop to Zurich. I would never do this because it's wasted time in the plane. So 48 hours flying and then 1 day workshop for 2 hours. I cannot perform this. But a 2 hours workshop in a 3D environment, being very interactive, that's really great. So that was one concrete example where I personally think that digitalization will change the whole way we are working together. And one of the disadvantages where we are working the digital network is the relationship account, because our relationships between you, me, the team, Robert, Henrike, and our partners on the supply side and our cross-functional supply partners, they are suffering from this online habits. And here we are working on solutions how we can push the relationship management. So that's my personal view about procurement in the future regarding digitalization. And I think what Henrike mentioned with digitalization, resilience, and sustainability, for me, that's some also the future. I would add one other thing, and we could also be the innovation driver within the company, because we have a huge funnel from the outside world into our company. And here we will have different setups. And happy that Robert is hopefully back. Robert, are you still there?
I think.
I cannot hear.
Oh dear.
Robert, maybe you
I can hear you all the time. Can you now?
Not very well, no.
Not very well. So,
oh my gosh.
Then we change over to Henning.
Okay, so in again.
Wonderful. Robert, there's one special question for you. Hello, Robert. Could you give us could you give all of us some insights how pooling supports the overall Siemens targets in respect to sustainability, which becomes more and more important in our world? I hope this question goes through.
Thomas, it really doesn't.
Henrike, we are.
Now I have to answer Robert's question.
No, you don't have to answer Robert's question. But Robert, maybe you restart the computer and then we try to do other things. Because we have from Claudia Holz a question to Henrike. Which value add should the pooling organization deliver besides availability? So what would you expect from your colleagues? So now you can open your wish list.
Oh God. The whole wish list? Is it Christmas already? Well, if it's for the rail infrastructure business, then actually availability is king, but also, and we already touched on it. We already touched on innovation, on quality, on cost, and then also on the sustainability aspect of it. So I think in all of these aspects, and really depending on the organization, on the material field, and on the demands that are necessary, you need to set the priorities right. And for us, availability and yes, also pricing and access, I guess, to certain suppliers is the key that pooling does for us. There's an example for some plastic raw material that we needed in the second tier of the supply chain for one of our sub-suppliers. We didn't have a relationship. We as the RI organization didn't have, let's say, a very strong relationship to that second tier OEM that was in the supply chain. However, going through Robert's organization, that opened a door within a week, and the let's say the challenge of our sub-supplier was solved within a couple of days, when the name and the relationship that was in place opened the door. So those are and will kind of remain the key aspects. I don't have additional ones outside the 5 aspects that Robert mentioned already.
I think what I really like with this answer, because if, say, we are reflecting the last 25 minutes, the usual historic view of procurement is negotiating prices. I think the word prices, it was risen one time, sometimes cost, but it's more important that we see the bigger picture, the availability, the access, the partnership. And I think that's, for me, also a strong indication that modern procurement organizations are not a pure negotiation function, that they are orchestrating the value chain. I think Klaus Staubitzer is never tired to drive the whole SCM organization into a value chain orchestrator. And I think you both here are confirming what he is wishing. And we have now several questions. So Robert, do you think you can answer now this naughty question? Are you back
I'm
on
not
track?
sure how long you could hear me. And the most important is, can you hear me again?
Now I can hear you,
me?
but I never hear the answer about the question. So I will restart the question and then you can answer. I don't tell the name because it's an internal colleague. Hello, Robert. Could you give all of us some insights how pooling supports the overall Siemens targets in respect to sustainability, which becomes more and more important? So how is pooling supporting the overall targets with respect to sustainability?
Well, there's a clear target for Siemens to be carbon neutral by 25, and of course, along with that, also procurement has to buy in, and we're doing that with something we call the carbon web assessment, and we've kicked off this initiative. And the idea, of course, is to identify not just the CO2 emission footprint of our own production sites, but also upstream of our supply chain side. And it starts, as always, with transparency, and building upon that transparency, we then jointly with our to come up with measures for improvement. So this is just maybe one topic, one very important topic that will be part of our daily work in the next years. But there's also a couple of initiatives that have been kicked off by our commodity managers. Brilliant ideas like green plastics, just to name one example, or augmented reality. I could still hear that Levin was raising a question a couple of minutes ago before I had to dial in again. So there's a couple of real good examples that we now have to check and then to scale up to make it usable, not just for one single event, but maybe to a wide extent.
Okay. Thanks. Then another question from Ivan Schmidt. What kind of digital procurement tools do you use and what is your experience with it? I will answer this shortly. We use a lot of tools. We have different experiences, but we will answer this question maybe in the next DigiSofa, in the next external one, or in the second next. That's something we already discussed internally, that we don't want to go into tool discussions today, because a tool is only as good as the people that are using it. Then I have a small question from Urwil to Henrike. Siemens Mobility's project procurement would be very dynamic in nature. How do we incorporate cost and value engineering more efficiently?
Even more efficiently. I think, probably early involvement is the key topic here. Already during the sales phase, of course, I think we have seen quite a number of examples where cost and value engineering has contributed, significantly already during our own bid phase or during our sales activities. I already mentioned that a big factor in rail infrastructure are services and technical services and engineering services in terms of volume. So that's a big portion where cost and value engineering also still needs to, let's say, enhance and develop their own capabilities, because in the past we have focused more on, hardware, if you want. But there are numerous examples already where we very, very efficiently work together with cost and value engineering to come to a knowledgeable position of being able to understand what we buy, in fact. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So early involvement, one of the solutions. I have a simple to Robert. I think you are obliged to answer it, but only maybe one or two sentences, because we are not the crystal ball. It's a simple from Garber Kistamash. How do you see the current raw material price development, like oil, copper, steel? Do you expect the same price boom like in 2009? I think it was 2007. So maybe an indication.
There's some parallels, and to a certain extent, I would agree to him. And we're going into the same direction. So all base materials, all commodities are rising like hell. And for oil, that's of course all the same. You can see that on the stock exchanges each day. So yes, would be my answer. I expecting something similar, maybe not the same altitude, but a similar direction.
Is that the Gabor from Transformers again?
I don't know, but 10 years ago, probably. But maybe it could be the same. So Gabor, best regards if you are the Kistamash from Budapest. Then I have a question. It sounds a little bit like South Africa, Vishwanath Motipawale, or India. And I think you can choose whoever wants to answer first. What drives to become Siemens as attractive customer for suppliers?
Shall I start? Do you like to start? Yeah. Ladies first.
Great. What drivers was it? The first two words of the question. I
What
didn't get
drives
that.
to become Siemens as attractive customer for suppliers?
What makes Siemens an attractive customer?
The customer present, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly, yeah, size and volume is one of the aspects that make it attractive for a supplier. Also, something like bigger projects that go via a long duration. So years of planning that are possible, and long partnerships or long durations of partnerships. Are certainly attractive aspects for Siemens as a customer. You also have a professional supply chain management organization to deal with. That is your customer, and we drive, not only price negotiations, but also topics around innovation and technology development together with our suppliers. I think all of that makes us a very, very attractive customer.
I guess it is
something to add.
Yeah, well, in my eyes, it is an opportunity for the suppliers to actually grow together with a company like Siemens, that is a global player. So this is certainly something that is of importance and of relevance for our supply side, but also the fact that he or she does not have to interact with multiple persons. So we have one single face to our suppliers, at least for the pooled materials. That, of course, makes collaboration a little bit easier. In my eyes, that's the second topic I would actually list up. And the third one certainly is the innovation part Henrike was pointing at already. So we are very much striving for innovative solutions. And if you consider that half of our business volume is purchasing volume, it's crystal clear that you also need to have innovative partners on the supply side if you want to really stay in the front runner position regarding innovation.
Okay, so we as Siemens, long-term planning, innovation driven, and also sustainable in the future as advantages for suppliers. I have now a question that I would like to somehow pool. We're in a pooling event from Danashi, from Andy, from Charlotte, because they are all somehow going the same direction. I take one: COVID, Suez accident, sustainability, many things more. Is Siemens planning to shift the material sourcing from globally back to locally or globally? So, Robert, will the supply chains change now tremendously because of this, say, crisis, pandemics, and other cases? What's your view?
Well,
and I think that's important.
The crisis certainly accelerates this kind of discussion. And of course, globalization is also one of the most discussed topics these days within Siemens supply chain management. And we, of course, need to find a balance between where's the best supply side places, and on one hand side, and on the other hand side, how can we pay attention to a more sustainable supply solution? And one has to remember that our factories are not all centered in Europe anymore. So we are located around the globe, and their local for local certainly plays a much bigger role in the future as it maybe does in today even. So yes, in my eyes, the crisis will accelerate a new, let's say, supply footprint in the near future.
Henrike, anything to add from your side?
Well, I tend to agree with that assumption. I think to me, the aspect of risk management plays even a bigger role, although we have always looked at supplier risks. But with more and more crisis coming along the way, there's a more, it's gathering more importance, the topic, and hence also the global supply chain and its impact on the risks is considered in a different way now with the knowledge of the past 12 months. So I think there will be a change to it. But it would be, I cannot paint the whole picture in the end. Local for local, but also still local for global. We will not, cut all the global supply chains now from one day to the other. That would be impossible, but there will be change. I'm quite sure.
Okay, I hope we could answer this question. Robert?
I just wanted to say we need to adapt to the needs and to the circumstances on the markets. Exactly as Henrike said, we won't cut global supply chains, but we will adapt them to the needs and to the times we are in. If you think about crisis times, of course, you need to get that reflected also in your supply.
Okay, thanks. So regarding this question, I would like to make a comment regarding sustainability, maybe in the next, say, 5 minutes, because there are 2 questions that I would like to answer before. One is from Samit from Gabriel Aluminium. It's a question to you both. Did your safety stock management change somehow in the special circumstances in terms of buffer against supply disturbance? So do we have now more or less stock as a safety buffer? Henrike, you have still a small manufacturing unit. Did you increase your buffers or same level or higher? Yes?
And yes, we did. Yes, we did increase though.
And Robert? What about your
I don't
experience
have a
with
on
our
corporate level, but of course that's one of our strategies. That's a counter reaction. One of the first, of course, to fill up your quantities on stock and to make sure that you can bridge a certain time. Yes, we do. That's the clear answer.
And maybe we go into details next time or second next time when we talk with Peter Ziegler about, say, our tool setup and I think especially supplier risk management. I think the colleagues from Function Excellence are doing a great job. Small spoiler, I think on the 19th of January 2020, we got a first strong, message internally that we have to do something because of COVID-19. But that's nothing for today because we want to talk about pooling. And here I would like to have a combination between Kaushendra and Florian. And I start now with Florian because he is asking directly, Henrike. Hello, Henrike. And it's the same topic. The second one goes then to Robert. Hello, Henrike. Do you see any changes in the collaboration between corporate services, pooling, and operating companies like mobility and energy? Do you still see some SAG pooling approach through all SAG companies in future? That's a bold question. So is there a change in the way how we collaborate from your point of view since we have this own operating companies?
I think what is the result of carving out one business after the other is good discussions, conversations, quite a bit of conflict as well that arose from these discussions, and putting it onto the table. What is it? What is the value? What do we want to keep? What do we not want to keep? And I think it's quite exhausting at times to have these discussions, but also important to continue in the light of the carve-outs and standalone companies that also do see a value in being less dependent on Siemens. So for the time being, I think we do still have a pooling organization and there are certain benefits attached to it, but we do also need to continue to discuss what the extent is and which categories are important and need to be prioritized and which categories maybe are better managed from within a business. And that's a very, very important discussion that we continue to have.
And here, Robert, this would fit to, you can also answer then Henrike's comment from Karl Schendra. In Siemens, we have commodity and category management in both pooling and business organizations for direct materials. Do you see some overlap duplication of activities between these two teams?
Well, I personally don't see overlaps to a big extent, but what I see is a match, and we need to have this match, especially in the direct material arena. Why that? Simply because you need to see that we need to stay in touch, in close contact with the needs of our R&D departments and also manufacturing departments. So you need to have a foot on the ground there. It's a little bit different compared to indirect commodities where you can fully centralize because it's clearly a commodity. In the other case, it's a pooled material, but very often based on a Siemens drawing, sometimes even with Siemens tools produced. So that's a different war game we are in on the direct pooling side. Hopefully that answers this question.
I expecting nothing else. So as I worked quite a long time, different roles together with the pooling organization, I see it like a team, like a soccer team. You have an offense, a defense, a goalie, and a coach. And it's the duplication of activities, yes, in the midfield. But you only need one goalie. And I think something similar is also with pooling. And pooling is also developing and changing. I think what Henrike mentioned is an interesting aspect. I think once a year, there's a review which categories create where pooling creating a benefit to be continued, or is no benefit, then it will be discontinued. And there were several pooling activities where we discontinued. But in the future, it may be a little bit different because there's a nice question from Dominik Buchner. And it's again for both of you. How is procurement supporting the shift from products-based business models to technology-driven platforms with multiple offerings? So product-based to technology-driven platforms with multiple offerings. How are we answering this, say, challenge of the setup of the business?
Well, I'm not sure what Dominik means with that. At the end of the day, my understanding of his question, at least, is we're not buying components that much anymore, maybe in the future, but more of systems or subsystems. But to a certain extent, we're already doing that today. So, and also subsystems you can pool to a certain extent. Then it is more on a supplier basis that you pool that, but it's possible. And not sure if the pooling approach is a complete different one in terms of a platform. In my eyes, it is not. Henrike?
Well, again, also from the RI perspective, we do cover, let's say, the whole spectrum in terms of what we buy. So there are just materials, if you want. There are lots of services that also add to the solution offering that we have. And then, yes, there are, especially in some of the more high-tech material fields, there are also solutions or complete packages that are being bought. And maybe, yes, they are less poolable because they are very, very specific to a certain project or product. And I guess that is one of the additional factors that will drive the discussion around what is poolable and what are the important categories and what cannot be pooled to a great extent. I guess for the time being, also to deliver solutions, you also still need materials and services that are very, very much poolable.
Plus, maybe this is also giving some indication, Thomas, along with the building the fleet of ships, as it is called, at Siemens, the carve-out units, we actually managed to keep our arms around all these carved-out units. There's not a single unit that had been carved out where we do not pool anymore. So obviously, there's a strong demand for the reasons we discussed earlier today. And the procurement price is certainly just one. More important, especially in times of crisis like the ones we are in, is availability, as Henrike pointed out a couple of times today. So all of them actually signed a cooperation agreement with us, so we keep pooling like we did in the past. And of course, the pooling portfolio, that has to be revisited on an annual basis. That's exactly what Henrike also said.
So Dominik, I don't know whether this answers in detail your question, but I think this shift from the products to platforms and to software will be definitely a challenge that we will all face. But when I think about purchasing councils that are now founded in 1999, they developed and reinvented themselves again and again, and the setup is not the same like in the past. And I think there will be also a solution regarding this. Before we go to the last two questions, I have to apologize to Marco. Which profile mindset do you expect from buyers in the future? I think this is something for one of the future DigiSofas where we talk about mindset again. And I would shortly answer the question from Peggy Medeiros. What has been the impact to SCM because of COVID-19 limiting our ability to meet face-to-face with suppliers? Virtual meetings increased or decreased our interactions? I would say it depends. That's always the typical answer, but it's definitely limited our abilities to meet our suppliers. And I think the colleagues at the sales department, at the suppliers and at Siemens, I think they are real heroes that they changed and had to adapt to build this glue between customer and supplier. But from my point of view, in the beginning, it decreased our interactions, but now having a suite of tools like Teams, Microsoft Teams meetings, circuit meetings, Zoom meetings, big scale, small scale. I think here we see a definitely increase of interactions because it's also easier now. You don't have to travel. You don't have to go into a plane, use a plane. And with the 3D topics like we are doing with our virtual collaboration in a 3D environment like TriCAD, that is definitely increasingly like hell in the meantime. And the third level where I see it only long term is the virtual reality cooperation, where we are experimenting since more than a year. And I think the VR glasses can show you 2 pairs of them in the meantime. I think that's the future, but the long-term future. And they will also then increase the interaction level. And this would lead to one of the ending questions where I would like to start with Pascal. How procurement pooling organizations are going to adapt to business ecosystem models? I think that's a naughty one to Robert. Also, how will the pooling organization adapt to this business ecosystems model?
What exactly does he mean with business ecosystems? Can you translate that for me? I'm not sure.
I think the ecosystem is the buzzword. At the end of the day, when you see, for example, our Simatic, it's an ecosystem of its own. But we are at the moment owning it, but there could be also another platform that's then hardware or software independent. Then business ecosystems is the question, like you see Airbnb. For me, it's a private ecosystem, because if you take Airbnb out, then it's collapsing, and Airbnb is the hub between customers and suppliers, new ways. And regarding this ecosystem model and the pooling, I think to shorten it up, also due to time issues, I think we have to learn and understand much more what is the ecosystem, not the buzzword. It's the real part of the ecosystem. And then I think the procurement and then the pooling organizations can adapt if we have more or less the parameters, what's meant with this.
I mean, we're all living in ecosystems for ages, and it's not really new, but just the way is changing a little bit in the meantime. And of course, also procurement, not just pooling, but all procurement has to adapt to this new way of doing business as well. On the procurement side, we're already doing that with interact with connecting platforms to each other. We call it a MyMall system. And by doing so, I guess there is an even wider view into the supply markets approachable than it had been in the past. But in the meantime, of course, that goes far beyond that. I'm not sure if he or she is pointing with the question exactly in this direction.
Okay. I have two more questions left. One is from Danashri, and maybe then Henrike could answer this question. With procurement taking up new roles and tasks related to sustainability, digitalization, data analytics, which Siemens functions like HR, sales, R&D, IT can be the most benefited and supported as business partners? So this goes in direction of ecosystem. We take more and more different tasks. And how do you think which Siemens functions are getting more important for procurement, and where can we benefit, where can they benefit?
Well, I think
Difficult
the
question.
business. Sorry?
Difficult question.
I think the functions that have always traditionally been our main interfaces, like sales, manufacturing, project management, and then also R&D, of course, they will remain important. I think HR, IT, other, let's say, functions that similarly support the business overall also continue to be main functions. Maybe IT actually has an even bigger role than in the past, but quite frankly, they are already now playing a very significant role in the interaction of all of us. So in terms of connecting systems, making use of data and using that to predict aspects, I don't think there's a function where we don't have significant interactions or that will change more now. I don't think so, actually. I think it continues to be procurement continues to be a very interactive or interface-driven function, and will stay that way. We can't just work on our own.
That's, I think, a nice summary of today. As we are running out of time, 1 minute left, I think I try to summarize that pooling is not only price negotiation. I think pooling is something, what I learned is a global footprint and enables us to strengthen long-term partnerships. And from a customer point of view, it's not only the price benefit, it's also availability and access to partners where we don't have, or where the individual wouldn't have access. Regarding our, say, customers from the outside, our listeners, our guests, there was a lot of topic regarding sustainability. I think we have to talk internally how maybe we do a DigiSofa about sustainability to go in details with this. I didn't want to answer what's the best organization because there won't be a clear answer. There was one question there. And before we go back to work, to lunch, I want to say thank you to Henrike for all the answering of the naughty questions, and also to Robert answering some very complex and very broad questions. I really enjoyed discussing with you. And a special thanks to Daniel in the background, because I think he made my day, because a crash, it was my internal system at home. And he revived me. So thanks that I could join it. And thanks our DigiSofa admin. Please give us some feedback. It will help us, because without feedback, we cannot improve. Please answer the simple question. That's the last comment. And Basha, yes, we are using blockchains, but no cryptocurrencies. And that's something maybe in the third or fourth DigiSofa. We have a long-term planning, and we will go back on this also to a sustainable blockchain that the Digi Network invented and handed over to the business. I think we have a lot of interesting stuff. I'm more than happy to share with you. Thanks to you all, and hope to see you again in 6 to 8 weeks. Goodbye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.